Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Canada once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a couple of times before. So I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last year or two, a couple of different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. They are still a relatively new addition to the Canadian beer scene, but like I say, they've made a very, very good reputation for themselves, and they are starting to kind of spread their wings a little bit and send their beers to other places, which is really nice to see, because for a long time, Canadian beer was very difficult to get, but these days we get quite a good selection of stuff here in Hong Kong. But yeah, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't tried from this brewery so far. It's a style that I very much enjoy, and I have heard very good things about this beer. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Canada, like I said. We are going to go to the province of Ontario, and we're going to go to a little place called Glen Robertson, although I have heard people saying that this brewery is actually from North Glengarry as well, so I'm not quite sure which is the correct place to use. But in any case, we are going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Wood Brothers Brewery. So this particular beer is called Thistle. It comes in at 7% ABV, and this one is a West Coast IPA. So yeah, very first time I'm trying a West Coast IPA from these guys. That was one of the main reasons for me buying this one, but then when it had the national flower of Scotland on it, I have to say that was something that just kind of pushed me even more to get a hold of this one. So yeah, as you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I love a good West Coast IPA, and I like trying different styles from breweries that you know quite well for one particular style. Like I said, Wood Brothers really made their name for the New England hazy IPAs, so the chance to try a West Coast IPA from these guys was one that I was not going to pass up. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's going to have in store for us. The Thistle 7% West Coast IPA from Wood Brothers Brewing Company in North Glengarry, Glen Robertson in Ontario over in Canada. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Wood Brothers Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Canadian playlist along with a number of other things. That's been added to quite regularly, of course, because we do get a good selection of Canadian beers here in Hong Kong, but do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days, even if I do say so myself. And if you're interested in Canadian craft beer, do make sure you check out my friends Lee Russell, who's one of the OG beer tubers. He's doing a lot of Canadian beer reviews as well, and there's also Red Beard off the 10th and a number of other Canadian beer tubers out there who are making very nice videos. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Wood Brothers Brewery, Wood Brothers Brewing Company once again. So, Wood Brothers Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Glen Robertson / North Glengarry. Like I say, I don't know which one to use, to be honest with you, but that is in Ontario and to the southeast of Ottawa, but to the west of Montreal over the border in Quebec, which is actually closer to where these guys are located. But the brewery started back in 2017, but the company officially opened its doors in 2019, and the main people behind founding it are Mark and Natasha Rickard, Louise Castonguay, Dan Whitehead, and also Kurt McSwain, and they do have quite a diverse variety of backgrounds. So Mark and Natasha are serial entrepreneurs, with the couple owning White Pine Lumber, which is a furniture company, and also offers various wood services as well. Mark also has his own design company from what I understand. Kurt is a farmer and runs a company called Dalgara Farms, and his family have been farming on this land in North Glengarry for at least 4 generations, and they actually produce a number of hops and other things that are used in a number of the Wood Brothers beers. And Dan and Louis worked as brewers, and they were involved at La Brosse Brewery in Pontclair in Montreal, but they also have their own brewing brand, which is called Gravedigging Bros, and you can follow them on Instagram. But apparently all of the founders kept their day jobs when they started the company, but I believe that has changed since the business has kind of established itself. But prior to the official opening of the brewery, they had apparently brewed around 150 batches to perfect a number of their recipes, and the brewery itself is based on a 65-acre farm, and they tapped their first keg in the spring of 2019. But over the years they've been building up the brewery infrastructure. This included installing a new brew house in 2020, and apparently the kind of brewery capacity, if you like, has tripled since the company foundation. These days they've also got a tap room at the brewery which opens on Fridays and Saturdays. And like I said, over the last couple of years, this brewery has become very well known for their different New England hazy IPAs. But in recent times, they have been diversifying a little bit and brewing different styles. I reviewed my first stout from these guys a couple of videos ago, if I remember correctly, and now we're getting a look at a West Coast IPA. But yeah, as of June 2025, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 650 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. Like I said, they are mainly known for those New England hazy IPAs, but they are starting to produce a number of different things in recent times as well. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to try more styles from this brewery going forward. But yeah, the stuff that I've had from them thus far has been pretty damn good. So definitely a Canadian brewery that I would recommend you check out should you get the chance. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Wood Brothers Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So as you can see, this one is another 473 milliliter can, one North American pint we should say. The artwork on this one is actually quite different to what we've seen from Wood Brothers in the past, because usually, yeah, they've got the kind of green or sometimes black sort of just strip on there, and it's usually got some kind of hop flower on it. But yeah, this one is pretty different, and like I say, I liked the fact that it had the thistle dew on it, because you know, the national flower of Scotland, you can probably hear my relation to that country in the accent. But yeah, I really thought this was nice, and it was also a West Coast IPA, which I love. So yeah, plain silver top on the can with this one. You can see on the back of the can there, they're saying, yeah, brewed in North Glengarry on Wiley Road, Ontario, of course, as well. So yeah, nicely presented beer, this one. 7% West Coast IPA, like I said. The hops in this one are Cascade, Centennial and Simcoe, so they're using old school hops in this. I'm curious to see exactly where on the West Coast IPA spectrum this beer is going to be, but we know all of those hops quite well. Cascade is 8% alpha acid. It gives you that kind of grapefruity and slightly piney resiny note, but I find it can give you a good little bit of pear and slightly kind of figgy-ish notes as well. Centennial, 12% alpha acid, that's going to give you a lot of lemony character and quite a bit of grassy zestiness. Simcoe is 12% alpha acid as well, and that's going to give you some nice kind of soft passion fruit and things like that. So yeah, all of those are American, which I think I mentioned, but yeah, a good kind of classic hop lineup in this one. So yeah, I don't think we need to say anything more about the technicalities and stuff of this beer. There you can see Wood Brothers Brewing Company on the side of the can. So I think it is about time that we get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Let's do it. I can get my finger under the ring pull, of course. But yeah, there we go. So let's do it. Ooh, this looks as if it's going to be nice. Right, so there we go. I think we've got about 75-80% of the beer out and into the glass at that. So that is enough time to have a, or that is enough to have a little look. Oh, Got a little bit of carbonation sticking to the side of the glass there, just on one patch. I must have missed that when I was washing it. But yeah, it looks very nice, this one. So as you can see, the beer's poured with about a 3/4 finger of a kind of, I would say slightly cream coloured head, but it could be perfectly white. But you can see it's actually quite a bubbly head on this one. It's kind of soapy almost. Smaller bubbles on the surface of the liquid there, but yeah, definitely soapier the further up that you go. But that head is going to fade away quickly to be a thinner, more foamy layer, and it looks really nice. So yeah, there's a little bit of particulate matter floating around in this one. I think we've maybe had it in the fridge a wee bit too long, but yeah, it looks nice. We touch a natural haze to the beer as well, which tells me it's probably unfiltered, if you like, and I like that in the West Coast IPAs. It just gives them a little bit more kind of bready backbone, if you like. But yeah, in terms of colour with this one, I would say that this is a very sort of light amber. If I stick my hand behind the glass there, I think you can see that a little bit better. So I would describe this beer as being kind of pale amber in its colour. When it comes to the colour of your beer, of course, remember the colour is determined firstly by the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer, and any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour as well. But when it comes to the IPA style category, you don't often have to care about that really. But yeah, for me, the West Coast IPAs, they can lean one of two ways. They can be a little bit more bready and biscuity, such as the Pliny the Elder from Russian River Brewing, or they can be a little bit more kind of caramelly and oily, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. So the more bready and biscuity ones are kind of lighter and amber like this. The more caramelly ones have like a really kind of deep, almost like blood orange kind of amber colour to them. This one isn't the lightest of ambers that I've seen from a West Coast IPA, so I suspect this could be somewhere in the middle of the course. But yeah, as I say, not too much in the way of visible carbonation apart from that patch that we got probably because of the glass earlier on. Unfiltered, I have to say it does look very nice, this one. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in terms of appearance, but nothing really unusual about it, the beer's appearance, when you consider what style it is. I think we can go on and have a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see what we have. So yeah, let's do this. Alright, so yeah, first impression of this one then. It's got actually quite a juicy and kind of bready aroma. It doesn't come across as being all that pungent, if you like, which is I've found that with some West Coast IPAs recently, and I'm quite curious to see just how the bitterness in this beer is going to be, because obviously a lot of craft beer drinkers these days have gotten into IPAs with the hazies, which have the lower bitterness and the kind of more juicy character. And so after, in recent times, there have been a number of breweries who've taken the bitterness of the West Coast IPAs back a little bit and used the same hopping methods as in a New England IPA. So I'm curious to see whether this beer is going to kind of follow on like that, actually. So yeah, the aroma of this one, I think, could be really quite interesting. So yeah, but it's given you kind of what you'd expect from a West Coast IPA, apart from the fact that it's kind of softer and more juicy. So you've got a nice bready backbone in there, a little bit of malty sweetness, a nice green component, and there's also a little bit of kind of juicy fruitiness in there. I'm curious about there isn't a canned on date on this one. I just wondered, because I saw the particulate matter in there as well, so I was a bit curious as to how old this particular beer is. But yeah, the thing is, we do get the hazy IPAs very fresh, so I don't know why I don't think that the West Coast IPAs would be any different. But yeah, just when I saw the wee particles in there, I did wonder a little bit. But yeah, let's just break the aroma of this beer down and describe it for you more in depth. But I will say it's more on the kind of bready end of the West Coast IPA spectrum. But yeah, so the backbone of this beer, if you sugar it up, you do get a wee bit more of a kind of wet breadiness out of it. But definitely some fresh kind of brown bready bread crust in there. Yeah, fresh kind of brown bready bread crust. There's a little bit of wood, a little bit of cracker as well, for sure. Good wee bit of wholemeal brown bread in this one. And as I say, the bready character in this beer it really is pretty wet in a sense. It almost smells a little touch oatmeal-y, this one, which I'm quite curious about. West Coast IPAs, of course, do use primarily barley malt in their malt base. It's not unheard of to use a little touch of wheat or a little touch of oat in them, but yeah, for the most part, it is barley malt. So, yeah, as I say, like a wet white bready character coming out of this one. I do get a little bit of like McVitie's digestive biscuity kind of character out of the beer. A little bit of sweeter caramel in there, but the beer is not overly sweet, I would say. And yeah, but the sweetness of the sweetness of the beer is quite kind of unusual in a sense. I would certainly say that. Yeah, for me, the maltiness of this one is just like quite wet bread, in all honesty. I didn't quite expect that from this beer, to be honest with you. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that's going to transpire in the flavour, in all honesty. But yeah, I think we've said everything we really can about the malty side of this one. The only thing I would say is you get more kind of bready character and a little bit of kind of cardboardy note out of it too, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, the yeasty side of the beer at the back of the nose then, for me, the yeasty side of this beer, there's a bit of sweet brown bread in there, a wee bit of kind of white bread as well, and a kind of more bread crusty note, and it's giving you that kind of crackery sort of vibe as well. So yeah, that's certainly quite interesting too. I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. So let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. So for me, the hoppy side of this beer, it's a little bit more. The hoppy side of the beer is quite interesting because it's got a little bit of a herbally, vegetally sort of thing coming into it, which I didn't quite expect. But yeah, when it comes to IPAs, you have three types of hoppings that you can do. You've got early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour or so of your wort boil. That gives you the vast majority of your bitterness and quite a deep, dank green component. You've got late addition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour or so of your wort boil. That gives you a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma, and a very bright green component. Then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, and that's all about flavour and aroma. And yeah, the West Coast IPAs tend to use all three types of hoppings, which is why they're kind of deeper, danker and more oily, whereas New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hopping for the most part, which is why they're softer and more juicy. But like I said earlier, a number of producers are doing West Coast IPAs with the kind of New England type hopping, late addition and dry hopping, of course. And I wonder if that's kind of what's going to be the case in this beer. We'll just need to see. But yeah, with this one, as I say, you've got a little bit of earthiness to the hoppy character. There's a wee bit of an almost kind of herbally sort of thing coming out of this one as well. And then yeah, a little bit of floral aromaticity, but a wee bit of grassiness to the beer as well. Yeah, not too much, as I say, not a lot of pungency in the green component of this one. In honesty, what I'm getting out of this makes me think this could be it could be an old can. But I've had some beers that have really surprised me in terms of aroma before. Like I've had some that have this vegetally herbal sort of thing, and then you try it and it's absolutely fine. So yeah, I'm curious about this. I don't know if they re-release this beer every year or something like that. I would have wondered if it was a Christmas beer, in honesty. But yeah, I'm certainly curious about this for sure. The green component isn't kind of piney and floral and grassy as I would have expected from a West Coast IPA. So yeah, we'll just need to see. In terms of the fruity side of things with the beer though, there is a little hint of grapefruit in there from the Cascade. There's a wee bit of that oily kind of peary sort of thing as well that Cascade can give you. I can smell the kind of like more oily passion fruit from the Simcoe as well, and yeah, there is a bit of that kind of lemony zesty character coming out of it from the Centennial too, but I'm getting quite a little bit of like apricot and pear, and you know, kind of drier apricots and like sultanas and stuff out of this one. So I do have to say, this beer's given me really unusual vibes from the aroma. It really isn't quite what I would have expected. But yeah, as I always say, just take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer and see what you think. But I'm really curious about this one now. From the aroma though, it makes me wonder, is this like an old can from a previous year or something like that? The only thing to do now is give it a taste and see what we think. So yeah, this one is the Thistle Dew, 7% West Coast IPA from Wood Brothers Brewing Company in Glen, Robertson / North Glengarry, Ontario, over in Canada. Let's get stuck into this. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Okay, interesting, right. I'm going to say straight away, yeah, you can see little more bits of particle coming out of this one. I think this beer, just going by the flavours, it has a couple of months age on it. I think there's no doubt about that. Yeah, I'm actually just, having tasted it, I'm just going to pause the video a wee second and kind of Google when this beer was actually released, because I want to be sure about this. Alright guys, so having given it a little bit of a Google, it does seem that this beer is a fairly recent release, and this one should be fresh. But the thing that's kind of throwing me about this is that it seems a little bit more like kind of woody and almost farmhousey in a way. So the only thing I can think of with this is that they're maybe using like a house yeast, and yeah, it really does give the whole beer this like woody, herbally, kind of vegetally sort of thing. And yeah, for me, like the West Coast IPAs are just all, you know, they should be kind of like quite clean, if that makes sense. So I'd be very curious just to see what they've done with this beer, in all honesty. But yeah, you can see the little bits of kind of sediment particle in this one at the bottom there, like I was talking about, and that's what made me wonder if this beer was a wee bit older or something like that. But it's got good ratings on Untappd. It's rated like 4. I always say to take that with a little bit of a pinch of salt. But yeah, as I say, this one's just, it's a little bit unusual for me, to be honest. And in fairness, yeah, when you take it in, you do get the kind of sweetness and things that you expect of the West Coast IPA. You do get the little bit of bitterness, but then yeah, into the aftertaste, you get a little bit more of the kind of woody, herbally, kind of vegetally sort of things. And the yeasty character, as I say, is quite kind of prominent in this one. But in fairness, when you think about the Wood Brothers New England IPAs, yeah, they are a bit more kind of yeasty leaning and farmhousey, which is one of the signatures of this brewery. So yeah, maybe they have kind of made a house yeast for this one. Maybe that's what's going on here. It's always interesting to think about things when it comes to this, and you know, they have certainly given me something to think about, of course. But yeah, I think this beer, you know, could potentially grow on me the more that I drink of it. We'll just need to see. But yeah, let's break the flavour down then and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. But as I say, it made me curious enough to go and Google the release date and things like that on this. So yeah, let's see what's going on here. Middle third of your palate then. At the backbone of the beer, you've got a bit of a kind of fresh, brown bready bread crust in there. As you move further forward toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a nice wee bit of kind of woodiness coming out of the beer. Yeah, on top of that, you do get a little bit of a kind of crackery character coming out of the beer. And yeah, the bread crusty character and the crackery notes and the sort of woodiness that the beer has do linger into the aftertaste. On top of that, you get a kind of brown bready layer, which is actually quite grainy in things. It's almost to the point where I would wonder if there's a wee bit of rye or something like that being used in this beer, because that would be another explanation for it. So yeah, I think a little bit of an almost like slightly rye bready character in the base potentially. Then above that you can feel another layer of a slightly sweeter wholemeal brown bread, and then above that there is more of a white bready character out of this one. So this beer does have a nice big bready presence to it, and you can kind of get that from the fact that it is, you know, it looks like it's unfiltered, and the other pictures that I saw on Untappd were like that with this one as well. So, you know, the impression that I do have of this one is that they're probably just doing something a wee bit different with this and using a house yeast or some local malts or something like that in it, and that's maybe just why it's not quite as clean as you might expect from a kind of conventional West Coast IPA. So yeah, it would be quite cool though if they're doing something like that. One thing I would say to them is to talk about that on the can, say what they're doing with it. Maybe this is their kind of farmhouse take on a West Coast IPA. That would explain it a wee bit better, because yeah, it would, and as I say, for me, being an ingredients nerd with beer, it would be interesting to know. But yeah, we've talked about the bready layer. So above the white bready layer in this one, you can feel a slight layer of like toasty, kind of caramelly character. Then above that, you've got a more oily, caramelly type layer just coming out of the beer. So you've you've got that little circle in the middle of your palate there. So toasty caramel underneath, then the more oily circle on top of that. The edges of the circle are more like McVitie's digestive biscuit. Then the dead centre of that is a more kind of sweet and oily caramel, that's for sure. So yeah, the sweet oily caramel that comes out of this one, I have to say, is really very, very nice. In terms of this beer, it does actually come across as being a little bit boozier than 7%, because yeah, you do get that boozy character in the middle of your palate there. But yeah, it does go together quite nicely, and the bitterness really builds into the aftertaste with this beer. But yeah, I like that with this one. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the middle third of your palate there. And the only other thing I'd add is that it gets a bit more grainy and dry into the aftertaste. So let's go to the back third of your palate then. As I've often said, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. But yeah, border region between middle and back third of your palate then, you get that little bit of bready build up in there, the kind of brown bread, grainy brown bread in the base, or maybe a rye bread, then the grainy brown bread above that, the fluffier fresh white bread there, and then I do suspect maybe there's a wee bit of Pilsner malt or wheat. I think maybe more Pilsner malt in this one, because you've got quite a crisp, dry character in there too. But yeah, the base of that back third of your palate, you've got the kind of brown bready bread crust in there, which is a little bit more grainy, of course. You've got the Jacob's cream cracker above that, a sort of rye bready character above that too, which is yeah, quite grainy and quite yeah, you can feel that layer is just a little bit lighter, taller and more airy. The wholemeal brown bready layer sits above that, which again is a little bit lighter, taller and more airy. Then above that you've got a fresh kind of, yeah, barley malt white bready layer which sits above that. Then you've got the more dense, you've got a bit more of a kind of Pilsner malty crispness, I think, sitting above that. I do suspect there is a bit of Pilsner malt in this one, and that's what's given the beer some of the dryness and stuff too. So yeah, that malty character on the back third of your palate is quite interesting. But then yeah, above everything else, you've got the yeasty side of the beer as well. So yeah, let's have a wee look at that yeasty side of things then. So yeah, yeasty side of the beer, for me, at its core, the yeasty character actually sweetens up into the aftertaste with this one. So yeah, you've got a sweeter kind of wholemeal brown bready character at the core there. As you move out from that, it's a little bit more of a kind of grainier brown bread, and then yeah, it's almost got a wee bit of a toasty bread crusty character on the very edge there. But yeah, yeah, the way this goes together is nice. But yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down or compresses down that little bit more and squashes together. So the malty and yeasty side of this beer is quite interesting. Like I say, I suspect maybe a house yeast or a little bit of a local malt in this one, or both. It just tastes a little bit different. But as I say, this beer is growing on me the more that I drink of it. But yeah, let's go on to the hoppy side of things with this beer then. With this one, you do get a good little bit of bitterness out of this. That's apparent when you take the beer in, and it does build into the aftertaste. So yeah, back corners of the palate with this beer, there's a little bit of earthiness in there. Then as you move further forward, it's a wee touch herbal and a little bit woody, and as you push toward, and maybe you get a bit of pine resin in there as well, right enough. But as you reach the kind of front corners of the as you reach the front corners of the palate, you get a nice little bit of floral aromaticity in there, a bit of spiciness as well. Then round the front curve of your palate, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So yeah, it's got a little bit of zestiness to it as well, which I think is really quite nice. So yeah, the way that kind of pieces together is nice, and that is kind of in keeping with what you expect of the West Coast IPA. So let's go to the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer, just to round off the flavour section of the video. So yeah, border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there. You can feel the sort of almost rye bready type character in the base, the brown bready character on top of that, the barley malt white bread, then a wee bit of the pilsner malt. But yeah, the base of that front third of your palate is the same as before. White bready bread crust, cracker, bit of rye bread, wholemeal brown bread, white bread, and then yeah, maybe just something a little bit smooth, like a little bit drier on top of that. As I say, I suspect a little bit of pilsner malt, but then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at that fruity side of things with this one then. So yeah, fruity side of this beer for me is really nice, and it is properly old school as well. So at the back of that, at the back of that front third of your palate, there's definitely a little bit of grapefruit in there, which is your Cascade all the way. As you move further forward from that, you can feel there's a little bit of that kind of peary, sultana type note that you get from Cascade as well. You can really feel that. But yeah, on top of that, there's oily kind of passion fruity notes there, maybe a little bit of dried apricot as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate. But then yeah, as you move, those dry apricot flavours come forward into the front half of that front third of your palate. But yeah, you've got a nice kind of lemony, zesty character coming out of the beer as well. So yeah, the way that all of that pieces together, I think is really nice in this one. But yeah, the fruitiness in this beer, that grows on me as well. I think yeah, the more that I drink of this one, and the more that my palate kind of adjusts to it, I can appreciate it a wee bit more. So I think it is fair to say this beer's got a little bit more of a kind of grainy, brown bready sort of backbone to it. But in fairness, the sweetness from the boozy side of it does build up too. So I think this is one maybe, yeah, I really think they've maybe got a little bit of rye in this. They're maybe using a house yeast or some locally produced malts. There's just something about this beer that's a wee bit different compared to the West Coast IPAs I'm used to. It just has that little bit of rusticy kind of feel to it, which is quite nice. But yeah, it's interesting stuff, we can certainly say that about this beer. It has grown on me. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the flavour section of this beer. But the floral aromatic spice and the pine resin and some of the graininess of this beer and the sweetness too, that's what lingers into the aftertaste. Let's round off the review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel then. So yeah. So mouthfeel wise, for me, mouthfeel wise, I would say this body is at top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth in this one, and this beer, it has quite a little bit of almost dryness to it. Yeah, there's a little bit of, yeah, I'm getting quite a wee bit of like dryness out of this beer, generally speaking. So it's not the most oily or clean of West Coast IPAs, as I've said a few times in the video. But yeah, we've got some nice bitterness in there. I think it's pushing the, you know, the 90, 100 IBU sort of thing. That bitterness really does linger there into the aftertaste, and that wasn't that obvious from the aroma. But yeah, your malty backbone, there's a bit of graininess underneath, smoothness in the middle, and a little bit of sweetness on top. But overall, the malty and yeasty character in this beer does give you a kind of dryness, and then yeah, you've got a nice little bit of oily, fruity character coming out of it as well. But yeah, the way that everything kind of pieces together in this one, I think is very, very nice, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. But yeah, I like what they're doing with this one. I think they've done a really good job with it. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that with this beer. Yeah, interesting stuff. Something a wee bit different from a brewery that I know fairly well. But yeah, it's given me something to think about, and that's what you want after 4,000 odd beer reviews. And it's an enjoyable beer. The only other thing I would say about it is that it does feel a little bit boozier than it actually is. But yeah, let's leave it there. This one was a Thistle Dew, a 7% West Coast IPA, quite an almost farmhousey and rusticy take on the style, if you like, from Wood Brothers Brewing Company in Glen, Robertson / North Glengarry, whatever we're supposed to call it, in Ontario over in Canada. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Wood Brothers Brewing Company as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys in another review very, very soon. Ciao just now.